Do you want to win a free one of these? Stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you exactly how. A few years ago, I was in the market for a new audio interface and I came across this, the Universal Audio Volt 276 audio interface. This is a legendary brand getting into the budget space for the first time, so I thought it was a great step up, especially from my little PreSonus 24c that I got over here. So I pulled the trigger. After using it for literal years, I am doing this video so that you can make an informed decision yourself on whether or not something like the Volt is worth the money for you. But here's what I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna give you every single technical specification. I'm not that guy. I'm not into that stuff. And honestly, I don't think it helps people with less experience who are trying to buy this kind of stuff. It's all just numbers and who cares? Is this going to sound good? What I will do is tell you what the features are and why it stands out as far as, budget audio interfaces, and whether or not this might be a good thing to pick up for yourself. Yeah, so we're going to keep things hyper practical while we compare this View A Volt 276 to this PreSonus 24c that I'd been using. Both of these now I've used for years and years, right? 3+ years. One of which, this one, you can basically get for half the price of this one. So, that's not nothing. That's not nothing. Or if you stick around, you have a chance of getting this absolutely free. First thing I want to talk about is the actual design of the thing. Now in the script, it's actually telling me that I wrote to hold the camera over the interface here, but I'm just going to continue showing it to you like this. I'll just zoom in because I'm lazy. I actually really like the design of this interface, especially the knob situation. These are nice big knobs that are very satisfying to turn. There's some resistance there. They don't just go right. There's some resistance there. This big button, this big monitor knob, absolutely love it. This is incredibly important, really easy to just reach over. Love the big knob. Gain knobs are also very nice compared to other interfaces with teeny knobs. These are tiny little knobs. You do one and your fingers, if it's just a little bit too big, you're turning the other one too. That doesn't help at all. It makes you feel like you have to turn it with tweezers or something. I don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. That's not a good time necessarily. But these big knobs, they're a joy to turn and to use. It makes you want to dial things in. Makes it feel really smooth. I'm being weird about it, but it's true. If you win this thing, you'll find out why. So these buttons are really tactile. They have really a kind of soft touch to them, and it feels honestly kind of good. And they have really bright colors as they light up. It's very, very satisfying. Everything is really easy to access. And as you can tell, unlike some other budget audio interfaces, unlike this audio interface, which is just a flat little kind of almost like a rack sort of thing, this is sort of meant for the desktop. Set it down here. Inputs are in here. Your phantom power here. Instrument line button here. We'll talk about that later. Headphone volume and your phones right there. It's all very easily accessible compared to, can you tell me where it is? It's back here for the headphones that you need coming to the front. You have to put it all the way around. It just sucks, man. It's not the best. In terms of lighting stuff up, we have a button here. We got the level meters and the 48 volt. That's the only thing that lights up. The fact that it's desktop like this, it really speaks to a specific consumer demographic, really speaks to the budget audience. This is a group of people who are not necessarily beginners, but don't necessarily want a rack of gear in their office, but they still want something that is able to achieve a pro sound because they're mostly in-the-box producers. You have the same brand that creates a lot of this rack gear. So this is a desktop audio interface that still values the kind of sound that you'd only get in a rack or studio kind of environment. This is especially good for people who want a little bit extra in their sound and also, have a home studio like this. They want simplicity in their audio rig. Another thing I appreciate about this is the option to have additional power here and to switch on and off the audio interface itself rather than it just constantly being on. When you plug this PreSonus in, it's just constantly on all the time. There's no switch back here. Nothing at all. It really isn't a great time. Bright blue light, just staring you in the face. It's not that bright. It's really not a big deal. I didn't really even notice it until I noticed that this had a switch like this, like my old M-Box Pro 3, which was also a great audio interface. The driver never got updated, so I had to sell it and get something else. It was a perfectly good audio interface. M-Box, Avid. It looks like Universal Audio just kind of sat down and really looked at budget audio interfaces and looked at the holes in the market and what people were asking for. What were problems that people were having in terms of usability, in terms of actually seeing how this thing feels and sounds, and how they could address those pain points. That's what they use in the marketing business, or they call it pain points. The materials on here do feel really nice. It feels really well put together. This fake wood paneling, Yes, just so much yes. I love it. They somehow brought in this like old school studio vibe and modernized it beautifully. Let's talk about all the bells and whistles. First, I want to talk about vintage mode over here, right above these knobs. Now, vintage mode, honestly, I think sounds great. I love it. You're actually hearing this mic through vintage mode right now. This routes the audio through a high-end emulation of UA's famed mic preamp, fancy stuff. What it practically does is this helps to shape the sound that's going into the input in a pleasing way right off the bat. Put headphones on or something if you want to actually hear this. This is without it, right? Now I'm talking to you without the vintage, high-end emulator for UA's mic preamp on, and now I'm turning it back on. Now it's on again. It's on, now it's off again. But now it's back on again, right? So it really got to listen to it again for a little bit. Now it's off, and listen to it a little bit. You can hear that there's a little bit more muffled sounding, more boxy kind of, but then when you turn it back on, there's a little bit less. Just teeny little subtle EQ moves. It's nice. I like it. A little bit of saturation too, potentially. I don't know. To my ears, it adds some high sheen and tames and rounds out the low end a bit. Now let's talk about the onboard compressor. This is a 76 compressor emulator that is one of the legendary compressors in the audio world. Good for them. Supposedly, this is what really makes this thing shine. It has 3 different settings. It's got Vox, it's got guitar, and it's got fast. What that means is Vox has a slow attack and a slow release. Guitar has a medium attack and a slow release. And fast has a fast attack and a fast release. This compressor comes with a standard 6 dB boost. I just engaged it, and now it is louder for sure. And you can probably hear some background noise and stuff too. I'll try not to edit that out in post. You may have just heard a car nearby. It really makes you have to be more careful about your room environment. That would be a great thing potentially for, I've got a closet right there. If I turn that into an ISO booth, maybe something like that. With a dynamic microphone like this in just a regular room that's barely treated, you can definitely hear how much room noise it ends up adding. That just kind of creates more work later in the post process that a beginner might not know to do, and that can set them back in sounding listenable. And that's not a great time because they don't know what they don't know. That's why we're doing this. This is the weakest part about it for me. The threshold and the gain, which we just talked about, these are fixed. They created that boost, and then they made it so that as you approach the clipping line, that's your fixed threshold, and as you go up, it will compress more and more. Let's see how this sounds. So I'm going to go back on the Vox. Now it's going to be louder, right? I can already see it. It's already in yellow. We're going to keep going up, going up, going up. Now it's at red. And you should be hearing some compression. The gain is basically all the way up. You should be hearing compression right now. And then, so this is literally all the way up at red, going back, easing back. And it's really sometimes difficult to hear exactly what's going on. I'm going to get this back. Kind of difficult to hear what's going on between the potential clipping and, the compression. Is it too compressed and that's why it's clipping, or is it clipping because the gain is too high? You won't see any compression unless you are riding the signal near clipping. Here's what it says in the UA manual. On the screen, future me. As you can see, that last sentence, it's telling us that we can go for this overdrive sound, replicating how you would saturate a sound in overdrive, get some pleasing sounding distortion by utilizing, you see up there, it also says, make sure vintage mode is enabled, right? So we're getting the emulation of pushing that preamp and getting that sort of saturated overdrive sort of distortion. And while that's awesome, right? It's cool that they're giving us that option, but it's also not very spelled out, and you sort of need to have more experience to be able to understand that is an on-purpose sound and not an oh no sound. And that's one of the reasons why, as we'll talk about a little bit later, who this is actually for. So this really makes room noise a bigger deal since the gain has to be ridden higher. It can help to teach you how to hear compression without the actual, visual representation of the gain reduction meter that you see on most compressors. There's a lot of subjectivity in this. All right, now let's talk about the Inst button right here. This button may seem innocuous, but it's actually really freaking awesome, especially when dialing in guitar tone. Now, what this does when it is lit up, it's a green button when it's lit up, this raises up the signal from mic level to instrument level. And the effect that this has is that it actually allows you to have a little bit more control over low gain, kind of crunchy, distortion in your amp sims. That means you're not riding the gain nearly as high, which then as it goes through the preamp, it creates its own color on the sound a little bit. It's a slight tone and color change and difference to me, but it really sounds, when the instrument button is on, it really sounds and feels more like plugging into a real guitar amp. That's a really, really great thing about this. A lot of, other budget interfaces will have an instrument button like that, but this PreSonus does not. It does have phantom power though, right there. It'd be very weird to find an interface that doesn't have phantom power. If you come across one, do not buy it. So on the back here, we have the MIDI in and out. This is really important for me because I also have an electronic drum set that I like to record with. So having MIDI in and out is really, really a big deal. The PreSonus also has MIDI in and out. This was a requirement for me. Not every budget interface will have MIDI in and out like this. So it's important. If that's something that you really need in your audio interface, keep an eye out for that. This PreSonus does have that, as well as the UA Volt 276. Now let's talk about phantom power. This is that 48V button over here. What this does is that it brings in 48 volts, literally, into the microphone. This is used for condenser microphones, which need a little extra boost in power in order to gain the sensitivity in the diaphragm that is needed to sound the way they need to sound. A microphone like this, a dynamic microphone, there's no extra power running into it. The only thing that's moving the diaphragm in here is the actual force and amplitude of the sound waves that are coming out of my mouth. Now next is direct monitoring. That's this direct button right over here. This one is pretty handy. It doesn't just show you your unfiltered signal. If you press it once, it pans each input left and right, and if you press it again, it sums it all into mono. That's actually really handy when you're problem solving inputs and you're just like, wait, where's that sound coming from? Hit it, split, boom. It's coming from the left or the right. There's only 2 inputs, so that's how you know. All right, let's talk about the metering now. These are the actual signal levels. These are honestly key for knowing when to turn down, not just your ears, but if you need something visual, this is really important because the meters will be green at the bottom, and then they'll become yellow, and then they'll be red, bright red at the top. We don't want red ever. Stay out of the red. You can hang out in yellow, that's fine, but stay out of the red. I like this a lot. I like how we have the input and the output over here. That's really, really nice. I really dig that. On the PreSonus here, we also have the input and the output, but these are it's just a little bit smaller. It's a little bit harder to see. It's not quite as bright as the Volt here. Like any good interface, there's the dB here on the Y-axis. You also have that between every single knob here on both of them, not just on one, for your input and output on the Volt 276. So we've been comparing it with the PreSonus a little bit now, but really, how does it stack up? This has no outboard effects, so that compressor goes out the window. And there's not really like a vintage mode or anything like that either. It really is just showing you kind of like the standard PreSonus mic preamp and what that sounds like. And honestly, it gets the job done. I've used it for years. I started my my YouTube channel with this interface. You know, like it's a good interface. It really is. That non-inst button, that does mean that you have to pump the inputs a little bit higher. You can see here they're pumped up. I didn't actually touch them all that much. They're up pretty high, right? The pots here are a little bit more proportional, I would say, than they are here. Now, it also doesn't really have the same direct monitoring. What this does have is a mixer knob here. When it's all the way at the playback, all the way to the right, that's only showing you, what the sound that's coming out of your computer. When you put it down to the mixer, then you're only hearing what's going into the audio interface. But aside from that, the 24C can do just about everything else. It has that MIDI in and out. It's bus powered. You don't have to worry about turning it on. I like being able to turn it on, but it's got the the balanced and unbalanced dual input there. The one thing I would give to the PreSonus 24C that came out years before this Volt here is that this came with 2 cables. This came with both a USB-C to USB-C and a USB-C to USB-A. The Volt comes with just the latter, just a USB-A to USB-C. In fact, I had to get another cord to go to USB-C to USB-C that was longer in order to make it work for my setup. In a world of dongles, this makes me feel considered. It's especially weird considering the 24C is not only an older audio interface, but also about half the price. Like what? PreSonus. They're a good company. So those are all the bells and whistles. Now let's talk about who is this for. The Volt 276 is not a beginner's interface. If you've been producing music or have been a musician for under 2 years, or you just don't have a well-trained an ear, this is not the interface for you. I don't think it's the right move. That being said, if you have the money, if it's in your budget and you're willing to learn and grow, this can be a fantastic interface to get and to grow into. This interface presents these more advanced options in a really straightforward way, especially the 76 compressor, and that's a big plus. And this outboard compressor, that's a first for the budget audio interface. And UA, they have their famous 76 compressor, and that's what you get on here. It also has the added benefit of helping to teach your ears what compression sounds like if you want to mess around with that. And that's a huge thing. That can take years for some people, but if you can mess around with this, you can just really what is happening to the sound? Literally write it down. You can really help build your critical listening skills, and that is going to be a boon for every single part of music, whether it's music producing, music writing, music playing, all of that, all of it. However, the fact remains, for many beginners, these options may just be overwhelming. If your eyes glazed over when I said the words preamp, compressor, or attack and release, the PreSonus might be the way to go. With this, you can learn the fundamentals, still get an awesome sound, of professional sound, honestly, because that's up to your skills, not the interface. It's about half the price, and maybe even more if you get it on sale. So if you're at the beginning of your journey, I would say get this one. It does it all, does everything you need to do. This is gonna do you good if you're a beginner. But if you're a little bit more advanced, you're working on your second interface, I think this is a good one. In fact, there's actually a version of the Volt without the compressor and has the vintage button. However, the reason I didn't go for it was that specific, non-compressor Volt has a more similar design like this. Everything is just on the front. It's all tiny. Nothing is on the top. And as a desktop audio interface, this design just kills. I would even pay for this design without even thinking about the compressors. Like, this is just a better design, period. That's how I feel about that. But it is worth considering too, because it's basically a Volt that looks like this, that doesn't have a compressor. It has the vintage on it, the vintage stuff. It has the instrument buttons on it as well, and a really solid sort of in-between option between these two. If you really like the vintage sound, but you don't care about the compressor and you don't care about the design. I really like the design on it and that it's desktop and it's really easy to use. That's why I got it. That's why I got two, but that's a different story. Ultimately, the UA276 is for slightly more seasoned folks who are interested in upgrading their recordings at the source without having to spend a whole lot on outboard gear and kind of play around and flirt with that world a little bit. Finally, we get to the good part that you've been waiting for. I have two of these. One of these is hooked up and you're hearing me through it right now, and the other one is in my hand that I'm showing you. So I'm just going to give this one away for free to one of you. Number one, you got to subscribe. Number two, go below this video and in the description or in a pinned comment, I have a number of free trainings and guides. There's one about production, there's one about guitar, there's one about writing awesome melodies. Grab one of those free trainings, and then three, comment below this video telling me which of the free trainings that you got. You do those three things, and in 1 month's time, after this video comes out, I will announce the winner, and I will ship this to you for realsies. Okay? You ready? Go! Thanks so much for watching and for hanging out with me today. I honestly had this script written for like literal years before I actually sat down to do it. I don't know why. It just is one of those things that happened. So here it is. This can be yours. It's a great interface. Remember, subscribe, go get one of my free trainings, then comment on which one you got below the video. That will give you a really solid chance, because I don't think a lot of people are going to see this video, of getting this baby for free. As promised, here is my second one. Here's the one you just saw, right? That's the one I was just holding throughout the whole video, and here is the other one. This is proof, my friends. I am not a liar. But here, see? See that? See those beautiful buttons? It's so good. Look how pretty it is. Anyway, see you guys later. Bye.